Controller debuffs will apply to one target per cast and will last for 10 seconds per cast. Casting the same debuff again will only restart the 10-second timer, but the effects will still remain. Every controller power set has access to 2 powers of each type of debuff. The damage debuff decreases a NPC's total damage output by 7%. Many players often get confused and call this a precision debuff. It's not. It doesn't just reduce precision damage, it reduces total damage. The red crosshair icon, or target symbol, underneath an enemy's name tag is indicative of the damage debuff being active. In PvP, it removes a DPS's damage modifier buff and also reduces 7% of their total damage. On a majority of NPCs, this is just a 7% debuff despite an NPC showing a green buff icon under their name tag. For example, Lex and Nexus of Reality, the raid, gains a green buff icon when he's matched with a robot in one of the rooms. This is to identify he's only slightly buffed and entering a different phase of the fight. The developers have referred to the buff and debuff icons as check engine lights in the past because the user interface doesn't tell you all the details. It is only recently, actually as of September 2015, that the developers started adding significant buffs for damage on NPCs in order to, and I'm quoting Jack Frost from a private message, to encourage players to play their non-DPS roles a bit more. End quote. This is referring to our ability to now remove significant damage buffs on bosses. In September, this started with the release of Desecrated Cathedral, specifically during the James boss fight. I'll show a short clip of the major damage buff James gets and how it's easily removed just by throwing the damage debuff. Keep an eye on James's hands and name tag. You'll see the green buff icon appear on his name tag, but you'll also see a yellow and black smoky aura animation around his hands in sync with it. That's what you want to look for. You want to look for prominent animations with a buff, any type of buff, whether it's the damage or defense or healing. So that's indicative of his damage buff. I'll cast the damage debuff probably maybe 3 or 4 seconds into the clip, and both the aura on his hands and green buff icon will disappear immediately.
Get your own. Nice try.
You can rewind that part if you need to. These buffs are active in both the normal and elite versions of that alert. Another current example of this is in the Prison Break raid, in both regular and elite. Dr. Light will perform a pulse beam animation where he drains the power from a player. That causes his damage buff to trigger. Teen Lantern confirmed to me in a private message that it is, and I'm quoting, a pretty big buff that increases his damage and adds even more because it's in the elite version. End quote. With Dr. Light, just look for a green icon underneath his name tag. Dr. Light will have a black and white smoky aura animation around his hands. Not yellow and black like James, but just like with James in the Cathedral alert, just cast the damage debuff and both will disappear. The green icon and the smoky aura animation around Dr. Light's hands. I'll show a clip now, but in this one, the random controller in the group never applies the debuff. So you'll only see the animation around Dr. Light's hands. So focus on that tell. Otherwise, if the controller had landed that debuff on, it would have disappeared. There you see Dr. Light, and he has the black and white smoky aura on his hands. And if you look at his name tag right underneath the word light at the bottom, you'll see the green crosshair. He's got the damage buff up. And there he's doing his pulse beam. That he drains your power, and that's one of the powers that he uses to kind of buff himself up to do more damage. All this controller had to do was just throw a damage debuff and it would have been wiped. Jack Frost goes on to say, and I'm quoting, "You may see more bosses in the future with similar mechanics." End quote. So going forward into new content, look for the green damage buff icon. And make sure you look for a prominent animation that's in sync with that icon. That more than likely means it's a damage buff, a significant damage buff. So far, any auras near a NPC's hands seem to indicate that increase. Your damage debuff will remove that damage increase from the boss, as well as apply the normal 7% damage reduction. Have shields ready, or coordinate with your healer if they have group shields, and you can further reduce damage taken in. In gadgets, the damage debuffs are Paralyzing Dart and Vortex Cannon. Info in this video was done through my own research from in-game testing, interviewing developers, and reviewing patch notes on the DCUO forums. Links and more info will be in the description below.